started. So again, this is a discussion of the integrating the new framework into sociology instruction. And again, the reason why we wanted to continue this is because we started a discussion at the last annual meeting in San Francisco, and we were really having some interesting discussions about how people are integrating into their instruction the new framework, and what issues they're having, and any successes that they have had, any challenges that they've had when doing this. And so I'd like to open it up to anybody who would like to share anything that they've experienced when integrating the threshold concepts into their instruction. Anyone?
Well, this is Wade Cotter from Weber State. Hello. I'm the social sciences and music librarian at Weber State, and sociology is one of my areas. And I'm really behind on the framework in a lot of ways, and we're kind of behind on it too. We just had a meeting yesterday where we talked about applying the framework in our overall information literacy program. And in reading the framework and in thinking about what I do with sociology and other instruction in other areas, I'm at the point where I'm thinking of looking at what I'm doing now, and we have a set of core outcomes that we define for our program. And I'm going to start at least by trying to map what I'm doing now with sections of the framework to help myself get a better perception of how the framework will work for us and how it might interplay with what we're doing right now. So I'm at the very beginning of this process. So I'm mostly interested in hearing what other people are doing.
And just to clarify, Wade, so you have learning outcomes that are specific to you in the libraries at Weber State, is that correct?
That's right.
Okay, and so you're now mapping your institutional sort of learning outcomes with those in the framework.
Exactly.
Okay. And how are you finding, if I may ask, how are you finding that process? Do you find that there's an alignment there, or are there disjunctures, or different language?
I'm just starting it, and it's going to be an interesting process. I'm still struggling with the nature of the language of the framework. It's not using a language and an approach that I'm very familiar with. I'm kind of old-fashioned, I guess. And so I'm struggling with it right now, and we're just barely starting that.
Just to clarify too, Wade, the learning outcomes that you have, are they specific to sociology instruction or social science instruction, or just library instruction more generally at Weber?
General. Then I generally, so across the institution, across all disciplines. And then I do have, I've focused on, for example, what publication manual or style guide that I use in different areas, but basically they're a general group that we apply across the institution.
I think just to jump in here, I think that's really interesting that you at least have a starting point, because we don't really have those at my institution. and instruction is much more free-form. As librarians, sort of, we can pretty much do what we want. We do have a department of instruction librarians who will work with us and consult with us, but generally we do what we want. So for me, it would be really interesting to at least have that task before me, to be able to sort of compare and contrast and map, because I'm feeling a little more, to use a sociological term, like I'm feeling more anomie in the sense that I can go with, you know, the framework, I can go with the older standards, I can go off in my own direction. So in some ways, it's interesting way that you actually have this task before you. I'm wondering if there are many other people, if that's the case in other institutions, that you're already sort of working with an internal set of you know, outcomes, and that you're looking to fit these in with the framework. Oh, and I see, so I'll just talk out loud some of the people who are adding in the chat. So Darcy Gervasio, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, she says it's the same at her library as at mine, where there's no sort of set outcomes. And Erin says she wishes she had them as well. And I think previously, yeah, Crystal Lewis says, nope, no outcomes at her institution either. And so for those of you who don't have any sort of like internal set of standards that you're working with, so do you find the framework freeing and interesting, or do you actually find it like me, I don't know, I kind of not quite sure which direction to go in, and you know, so Charisse adds that there's no formal mapping or outcomes at the library where she works either, but she's been incorporating the concepts on her own. Oh, and she recommends a particular book, and I'm going to click on that link.
I know, me too, because I actually, if it's the book I'm thinking about, yes, it's the book I'm thinking about, and the title of the book is Teaching Information Literacy Threshold Concepts, Lesson Plans for Librarians. I actually I participated in a webinar with the authors of this book about 2 months ago, and it was incredibly useful. It was very pragmatic, a very pragmatic way of approaching taking those threshold concepts, those frames, and designing lesson plans around them. And the book is full of examples. We actually bought the book after I attended the webinar, but we actually bought the book and we went through the book, and what we discovered were a few things. When doing this, we found, just as the authors found, that the easiest way to incorporate, or that we thought the most pragmatic way of incorporating the new framework, was to really focus on your learning objectives with whatever class it is that you're teaching. And this was probably, they focused mainly on one-shots. But what we found is if you, and we're finding this at our institution too, is if you focus on the learning objectives and try to align those with, or somehow map those to the various frames, that it's much easier to do that integration. But I wanted to put in a word for that book also, because I found it incredibly helpful to take a look at it. And I don't have any relationship with the authors other than I've heard them speak, but I would definitely recommend it.
Has anybody, I'm just wondering too, has anybody else used this book or seen this book or found it helpful? And again, we invite, for those of you who are just joining, please feel free to speak. You can turn on your microphones. We invite everybody to speak and contribute. You don't have to chat if you have the technology to use your microphone. And so just also sort of talk about what's happening in the chat. So Rui says that her institution is also similar, where they don't have standards. She recommends an article, and Darcy says that she thinks it's great as well. I'm opening these links.
Yeah, actually, I have the article printed out, and one of the things that Megan Oakleaf, who wrote the article, on one of the pages she talks about teaching backwards, which basically she's saying start with your outcomes, start with your learning objectives, and work backwards. And I know personally myself, and in my institution, we're kind of pushing to do that and to create learning outcomes for every class that we teach, and then working backwards in terms of both the frames as well as our assessments. And I have found it to really kind of change the way I'm teaching, because I'm much more organized now that I teach this way, because I've got kind of this roadmap that's guiding me.
Yeah, I'm just looking at this article now. It looks really thorough. It looks good.
Hi, this is Darcy here. I'm at SUNY Purchase in New York, and I was wondering if people have been doing any kind of more soft rollouts of some of these, incorporating the framework into their teaching. In my case, I haven't made a concerted effort to apply this to every single class or in an organized way across all of the classes that we do at Purchase, but I have within classes that I am working with, or maybe even with individual partnerships with professors, I've been trying to focus more on larger ideas, or place the skills I'm teaching students into a larger idea about, for example, information having value, or scholarship and inquiry being this ongoing process. So maybe I haven't really changed lessons or assignments that much, but I do find myself expressly discussing ideas like the fact that database vendors are, have corporate interests, and kind of explaining that to students, explaining to them that EBSCO and ProQuest are rival companies, and this might influence what they see or what they don't. And I find that students are pretty receptive to those kinds of discussions. So I am interested in how to incorporate the framework in big picture ways, but I'm wondering who else has been sort of rolling it out in smaller ways too.
Hello, this is Ray Wang from Central Michigan University. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, I'm not sure my microphone works. I think I agree that framework is more for a bigger picture and more philosophical. I think what we have been doing for library instruction or information literacy is pretty much the same. There's not much difference between, practically, there's not very much different from, follow either standard or framework. I think when I read the article from the article I sent through the chat, they talk about the framework intentionally omit the learning outcomes. So there's a thing that is that because my point is that it's not simple as we can use the old concept, or standard to compare framework, because the standard have a set of the concept, talk about the skills, so I don't have a lot of things to see in the smaller side, because in that article, the author offered several examples about how to assess, information literacy in specific ways. But I have two things. One, I wanted to see that. Sorry about it, my mind is kind of free floating. So one thing is that I saw your agenda and have posed several really good questions. One question is that how the best educated faculty about the new framework. I think I have something I did it in the fall, in the 2004 semester, because definitely before every semester started, so I will try to marketing my library instruction services to faculty. So then this time I did different way. So I did a presentation, and I think faculty. At that time I thought how I can approach the faculty, talk the way the faculty can feel comfortable with that, because faculty doesn't care about standards or framework, and so I linked. I did link information literature to a particular publication. It's called Academically Adrift. Talk about the book. I mean the study by two sociologists. They found out that the college students, they are not engaged academically as we expected. So I try to align with the library instruction to that book, and marketing the library instruction is the way. Library instruction is very critical. It's critical too. I mean, it can help students to go through their critical thinking. I mean, critical research stage to develop their critical thinking skills. So that presentation went well. A lot of a little bit more faculty asked me to do library instruction. So last semester I did 30 library instruction sessions. So it's higher than other semesters. So I'm thinking about my point is that the learning outcome seems not very specific as standards. Usually already described. So then information literacy framework seems better marketing to at least to connect the faculty. So then after that, and then I also linked, yes, in the presentation, I also linked to that part framework to my assessment outcome. The assessment I did in 2014, and I developed a new tool to assess one-shot library instruction. So this article was accepted by a journal. It's going to be published in July 2016. Then my assessment found out that students, because the way is that I didn't use a lot of people use this way, use the rubric of the information literacy standard to assess library instruction. So I used it's called a conceptual approach to assess students' research readiness in the beginning of the research stage. So I found out, the library instruction one-shot session did improve the student research readiness. So then, so definitely, I'm thinking about it, because my conclusion is that this assessment is different from. It can be considered as a shift from standard to framework. So in general, probably I didn't see clearly, but I'm thinking about the framework is really kind of a different way, different approach, different philosophy can guide our practice differently. So our information literacy, instruction information literacy committee will have a meeting in the next hour from 3 to 4. So then we also will have a discussion about an article. The article is published in 2015 October. So that article is called "From Standards to Framework," and talk about the current issue and also the difference between these two. And so I think the layout is really good way for us to understand why frameworks existed. And so then our information literacy, instruction information literacy committee is trying to make a decision or do the preparation work for the revision of the disciplinary standard, so the current standard for anthropology sociology. So my question for this group is that would you be interested in in the revision, and what are your thoughts about it? So then, with your discussion for for this meeting. Thank you. Hello.
I'm still here.
I thought I was disconnected.
No. I think everybody's just sort of processing and taking it in.
Probably too much information, I think. Okay.
That's okay. We'll give everybody a moment.
Mm-hmm. I really like to hear people's discussion about the last question. Does ANSS have a role in the transition to the new framework? So this will really beneficial for our committee to make a decision how we're going to approach to the revision.
This is Wade. I think there is a role for the Information Literacy Committee to look at that, but I think that really needs to be discussed more with that committee and perhaps in a broader discussion with the Executive Committee of ANSS.
That sounds a good idea. You can have a discussion with the Executive Committee members.
Well, I think the Information Literacy Committee should, as part of their report to Executive Committee in a couple of weeks in the virtual meeting, explore with the Executive Committee as a suggestion of that possibility for that committee being charged to explore revising what we did before.
Good idea. Thank you. Thank you, Wade.
And I think Rui Darcy contributed via chat.
Mm-hmm.
That she'd like to see a compilation of assignments and lesson plans that use the framework that work well for these types of social science courses like Anthro and Soc. And so she thinks there might be a role for ANSS in that.
Okay. I'm going to copy paste all comments.
And while Rui is doing that, I see Helen previously said that at her institution they're working on all of this and that they have a new instructional designer who's going to be using that backward design, which Susan sort of talked about, which came out of the article that that, let's see, Rui linked for us. But she said that they're going to be mainly working with English comp classes, and Helen won't be involved with a lot of that entry-level instruction, and that she says that the ANSS website is a good place to put resources, Rui. So as your committee possibly develops things, putting them on the website. And I'm just wondering, I mean, in terms of what Helen just said too, that at her institution they're working with an instructional designer, and so that's a great place to sort of start incorporating the framework and using that. I'm just wondering too how many people have instructional designers or have a special team of instructional librarians who help formulate a lot of the lesson plans and instruction that happen at their institutions.
We could only hope here at Weber.
I'm sorry, what was that, Wade?
We can only hope that at Heber, here at Weber.
Yeah.
How did I say Heber? We're all responsible on our own, and then as a group of the subject librarians and our head of instruction, who is also a subject librarian, we work together to develop curriculum, and then each of us individually also works on their subject-specific course that we teach, several of us, and also the one-shot sessions. So, no, we don't have any curriculum designers here to help us with that. We're on our own.
Same here. And Susan says that they have an instructional designer that helps create online learning objects, but they have to, the librarians are responsible for supplying all the scripts. And Darcy says that they tried to hire an instructional designer, but the search has failed. Oh, that's interesting. A group of instruction librarians collaborate, but we don't have an instructional design expert. And then Helen adds that the instructional designer is pretty new for them because we've had some coordination and a lot of individual efforts as well. That's interesting.
I should say that we do have some assistance in very general sense from a couple of people that work with our WSU or Weber State Online, but it's very, very, I guess you say, very high level assistance, and all the content and all the outcomes and everything has to come from us, and they are willing to suggest some ways in terms of the online to help us better apply what we're trying to do.
And just out of curiosity, this is mildly tangential to this conversation, but Wade, are the librarians embedded in the online courses at Weber that the institution offers?
Well, in some of them, yes, and some no. It varies. We have a information literacy requirements for the general education requirements that can be completed by taking a test or by taking one of several courses, 1 credit hour courses that we offer here in the library. I do one for the social sciences, but there's also a general course, and so we get to see the students quite a lot. So in that sense, they are required either to pass the exam or to complete this course. So we get to see a lot of them. We also do subject-specific sessions for our English 2010, which is they call intermediate writing, but it's the course that most of our incoming students take. So we kind of have that dual-pronged approach.
So have we lost you, Susan? Sorry. I think we may have lost Susan's voice, but she's still here, if I'm not mistaken. I know actually I'm not seeing her on the list now. Yeah, perhaps, yes. Okay, yes. So Susan's here. Susan's here, but she's lost her mic, unfortunately. I think this happened last time when we did the test. So I see Rui has also added, she asked if we've heard of CORA, the community of online research assignments, and she says it includes all disciplines. So I'm going to open up that link because I've not heard of CORA. Oh, and then I see, let's see. Heidi has an example of mapping a topic in the classroom to a frame. Would people like to hear that? I would certainly like to hear that, and so would Erin and Susan.
Okay. Can everybody hear me?
I can hear you, yeah.
Okay, great.
Yep.
So I actually didn't even think of this until today because I hadn't.
Gail, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes?
Hello?
Yep, Rui, can you hear Heidi speaking?
Can you hear me?
It's kind of, not very clear because we have a network problem.
Oh, okay. Would higher volume help?
Yeah, I think that's fine. I think if you continue speaking, is anybody else having, so Darcy says she can hear Heidi fine, so can Sarah. Okay. So
I can hear her
okay.
fine.
I'll try to speak clearly then. So this didn't even occur to me until today because the framework hadn't really been on my radar when I was planning for this introduction I gave to this class. But I'm involved in a service learning class, a sociology class, a 200-level class, and they're going to be working directly with community organizations such as the Native American Student Association, the Coalition for 100 Black Women, an organization that helps immigrants, and then one other organization. But they're actually providing information to these community organizations and doing research for them to fulfill a specific request that each organization has. And so I had, I kind of did a bit of lecturing about this, but about the issue of, we have privilege as, the course is called Ethnic Groups, so they're going to be talking a lot about privilege and racism. We have privilege as students, faculty, and staff at our institution because we have access to this information that's behind a paywall. So that maps beautifully to information has value. And I don't know if anybody else does service learning courses, but I just now see this opportunity to kind of enrich that conversation that we'll have about that. So I don't know if anyone has any thoughts about that or comments.
Hi, Heidi. Can you type your question? Because right now I can only hear, I cannot hear all of your talk, only partial of me.
Okay, so Heidi's currently going to type her question. And I think after you type that, Heidi, I'd actually like to hear maybe you talk a little bit more about how you're actually, you mentioned you're going to use the, sorry, let me pull it up. sorry, my computer is acting funny. Information has value. That was the frame that you were going to use, I guess, as the basis for your instruction session. I was wondering if you just talk a little bit more about that, because I'm still somewhat new to a lot of these frames and what they mean, and how we can, and I guess that's where I struggle with incorporating them into my instruction. So I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit more about that.
Sure. Well, I need to go back and reread all the dispositions and knowledge practices, but so basically we're just talking about how information is a commodity at an institution where there is a paywall and there is open access and there's that kind of divide. So we'll talk about how it might be a good idea for them to look as much as possible for open access resources, but also not to, that information that's behind a paywall also is valuable, and not to overlook that as well, but be able to draw upon that to provide information to the community. So let me just look here. So it's kind of a conflict between also respecting publisher agreements and licensing issues, and making information freely available, and that kind of creates an issue to think about. We have to respect the law, we have to respect licensing agreements, but I'm not really sure where I'm going with this exactly, but I have a lot to think about and work on, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I think you would also, because I just pulled up the framework myself, and I'm looking more closely at what they mean by information has value, and sort of the practices and the dispositions. But yeah, I mean, you had started off talking about this based on the concept of privilege, and I see that comes up in the dispositions a lot.
Yeah,
notion, so this notion of like information privilege.
Right. It's not commonly listed among forms of privilege, but it definitely is a form of privilege that we take for granted as faculty and staff in academic institutions.
Yeah, I think we take for granted, and I think it's also very much obscured in the way that we're constantly, as libraries, trying to make our resources seamless, right? And so we have all these link resolvers, and so a lot of the fact that we pay for these things and that they're subscription-based becomes veiled to users, especially, I know like at my campus, when they're on campus and they're on a networked computer, all that full text comes up, they don't realize that they've actually paid for it with their tuition. And so I feel like I try to do a lot of work around that in my classroom, but I've never actually made it a focal point, which I think the framework is pushing us to sort of make a lot of these things, like you said, things that we take for granted or that aren't transparent, to make them a little bit more transparent. But I do wonder how the systems, so Darcy's saying she thinks demystifying the privilege and corporate forces behind the information we access is important. And that her students, especially those in sociology courses, have been intrigued by discussions about the monetization of information. So yeah, that's fascinating. And I like that links into how they're learning to think as sociologists, right, and how to use their sociological imagination. Because so much of sociology is about that, right, about sort of uncovering the taken for granted, like what Heidi said, and I think that's really important. So yeah, so some of these frames are really super useful. And then Darcy also adds that it's a shame that we don't have more time to cover this in a one-shot. And that she tries to purposely include this in her teaching. And I think, not to go on and on, I'd like others to speak as well, but it's funny that I actually originally raised it in my classes, not so much from a pedagogical, like not to teach people that information has value, but almost more from a functional perspective that like when they're off campus, they can't access these articles, like they actually, almost from a practical point of view. So I'm teaching them, like the reason why you can't access this is because we actually pay for these things, and here's how you actually can access those things that are behind a paywall. But I haven't really taken it a step further to actually make it, where am I going with this? But to, I don't want to say to take a value stance on it, but that yeah, to sort of uncover the sociology of that. I sort of say it in passing more as like, you're gonna wanna go through the library so that you have access to things, and not really impress upon them the whole like political economy behind information. And so, sorry, as I'm speaking, I see other people are contributing via chat. And Susan adds that search engines like Google read your email, give you results that the search engine thinks you want based on what you have looked at before, and that students are shocked when they hear that. Yeah. So I'd love to hear others, because I do bring that up a lot, because Google Scholar always comes up. I'm trying to teach library resources, and a lot of times they'll just say, oh, I use Google Scholar. And then I kind of have this whole spiel that I do, which is a little bit more sort of sociological in nature, where I talk about Google and how it works differently and why it's so sort of like functionally how it works differently, but also the political implications of how it works, and that it's basically trying to read you as a person and give you what it thinks you want, and how that might not actually be what you want. So I'm just wondering if Google and Google Scholar and all that plays into other people's instruction, and how that then might fit into the framework. Oh, so Heidi says she's taught workshops in the filter bubble. I've never heard of that concept, the filter bubble. Heidi, could you explain? Do you want to say more about that? I'd love to hear you talk about that.
Sure. So so it's, oh, my screen keeps minimizing. So it's just this idea that based on what you click, you get results that the search engine thinks you would like. So it's smart. But then you end up having your ideas confirmed. So I think it's called, I don't remember what that phenomenon is called, but you end up in this bubble where you're getting results that confirm what you previously thought and previously knew, instead of results that challenge your thinking. So I don't know that there's a whole lot of research about it, so I'm not really sure that it actually has this effect. Eli Pariser is the person who came up with it, and he wrote a book about the filter bubble. But it is kind of disturbing to think about if it's true, if that's how it works. So yeah, this was an unusual situation. I was a GA at University of Illinois, and they have a workshop series there for kind of researchers. So not every school has that, I know, but it was a unique opportunity to teach about something that people seem to be really interested in.
And Susan says, Google Scholar must think librarians are schizophrenic because we search for such diverse topics all the time. That is true. I would love, so, and Charisse adds, perfect lesson for a service learning class. We've had an issue come up where some community partners wanted access to our online resources. We educate students that they need to use our databases to compile resources for the organizations, and then teach their community partners about free open access sources and resources available via the public library. So that's a great addition to what Heidi was talking about. But I would love, Heidi, to, and this is me personally, would you be at all comfortable or interested in sharing sort of the materials that you prepared for that workshop with either this group or with me personally? Because I'd love to learn how you approach teaching that.
Sure. Yeah, I can do that.
That'd be great. If you want to, you can send them to me. If you don't already have my email, I can send it to you. And then maybe we can talk about if people who were on this, who were here today, if they would also be interested in sharing those types of materials. And I see there's a bunch of chats coming in. And so Helen says it would be useful to see how Heidi has done this. So great. And Susan says this brings up another thing I'm interested in. How can ANSS or this group help each other outside of discussions like this to deal with the new framework? And Cherie says, I've heard more discussion around the framework for first-year instruction, but she hasn't heard as much about teaching to the disciplines. But I haven't been on the ILI list lately. So I think Susan and Cherise raise a good point. So how can we continue to support each other, especially as instruction is specific to sociology? And I see we're coming up on our time. It's about 1:53 now. So maybe we can sort of end on that note. Do people have any ideas how we can continue to support each other in this way beyond just this discussion group? Is it about compiling, existing materials we've already prepared, the mapping we've done between our existing learning outcomes and the framework? Like what types of things can we share and continue to do to support one another in this way?
I think from the information literacy committee, so we really like to, we are really interested in this kind of development. So I wonder if any idea, the information literacy committee can do to organize kind of activities or discussions or particular website, because we already have a website, the page on the ANSS website about the lesson plans, sharing lesson plans and notes. But then sadly, according to Adam, and he said, because he's the one to organize, to post such information, so far he hasn't received any submission. So we're wondering how we can market this kind of page and link to what we talk about today in your sociology librarian discussion group.
We have some chats coming in on this topic. Susan says if we could have some place where we could submit things to share, that would be good. Cherise would also suggest sharing lesson plans, and perhaps we could have this type of discussion more often with someone leading off with a lesson idea. I think that's a great idea, because so far we've had really free-form discussions about this, but maybe concretizing it and actually focusing it around a very specific lesson plan that maybe somebody's already prepared, or they're looking that they're preparing because they want to maybe teach it sometime soon. That would be great, and they're looking for feedback. So I think that's a great idea. I agree. Sarah chimes in. She thinks that these are both really good ideas, and I agree.
Again, sort of what I said before, Rui, as that committee meets, I think we need to have them explore the kinds of things that we can do, and then the discussion group, which is an informal group that doesn't have a real, a constant membership, can then respond to post on the listserv or other requesting that people post this, but it really needs to be the Information Literacy Committee that kind of sets that up and decides how it will be doing. And of course, they'll also want to think about anthropology as well, and perhaps criminal justice.
Yes. Yes, this is a good idea because I agree that this is a free form and membership kind of goes. And also a discussion, we only have 1 hour. There's a lot of, because this is a really complicated and huge debate about the framework. So there's a lot of information. And I think what I can do is report back to the IL committee today. We're going to have a meeting from 3 to 4. And also maybe talk about how we're going to market the page. So right now, the current page under ANSS page is all about the LibGuide. The LibGuide for course guide, subject guide for different disciplines, sociology, anthropology, but not a lot of lesson plans, that kind of thing. So yes, we're going to explore. This is a really good idea, Wade, and we're going to explore how we're going to have a better approach to marketing to use that website.
And so again, we're coming up on time here. And I don't want to keep anybody past time, so we should probably end it soon. But I see Susan has also chimed in. If we're interested in continuing with the topic of instruction, we could do a lightning round at the next discussion group at ALA, and that is posed as a question. And she said we could ask people for examples of instruction classes they have taught. So that's really interesting.
I think that's a great idea.
Okay, so we are at 1:59. So I thank you all for coming. I thank you all for participating. I'm sorry that it was uneven and that some people had voice privileges and other people didn't. That's always unfortunate. But we're so happy to have you, and hopefully we can continue the discussion and we can continue talking about these issues, and whether we do it here in this discussion group or whether the instructional committee takes over these conversations. I think it's just great that we continue to have them. So thank you to everybody for coming. I wish you a wonderful day for those of you in the storm path on the Northeast. I hope you're stocked up on food. And thanks for coming. And we're gonna hopefully have this recorded, the audio recorded, and we're gonna try and take a snapshot of the chat so we have all of this documented. So look for that in the coming week or two. All right. So that's it. Have a great one. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. All right. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Jill. Thank you, Susan. It's good meeting. Thank you.